um, once the webinar is over, so much later on tonight. You should have it, or by tomorrow, as usual. We usually tend to share it. You can usually find all the webinar recordings if you follow on Twitter at TESOL or at ESL Webinars or at American TESOL. So I will put all of that for you so that way you can go follow that and get the webinars. So welcome everyone to another American TESOL Presents Free Friday webinars. I am your hostess, Shelly Sanchez Terrell. And last week we talked about pronunciation for young learners. And this week we're going to talk about enhancing pronunciation skills for teens and adults. And the reason we differentiate is because when we talk about young learners, we often talk about phonics and why pronunciation is part of the building blocks of learning, the building blocks of any language. But when we talk about teens and adults, pronunciation is different in the way that you approach it, because adults and teens have already learned or had those building blocks within a language, whether it's their own language or maybe they've done that for several different languages. So it's important that we make that distinction because the teaching styles are very different. The instructional styles are different. Also, the different types of resources. But there are some similarities on the way that you teach pronunciation to teens and adults and young learners and all language learners in general. So we'll cover all of that. You can find the resources if you go to americantesol.com/blogger. We're here every week thanks to American TESOL. I've been Shelly Sanchez Terrell with TESOL for over 7 years. We have over 100 webinars, and you can find them on our YouTube channel, the recordings, usually by me. If you go to americantesol.com, user a TESOL, and that is also shared in the chat box. We also have online and face-to-face certification courses. You can receive a certification in TESOL, TESOL Advanced, teaching business English, and also teaching young learners and teaching with technology as well. I think with pronunciation, especially when it focuses on adults and teens, the forerunner and someone that is really well known in the field and someone you can learn a lot from is Adrienne Underhill. I've actually been able to meet Adrienne Underhill at a few conferences that I've presented at, and he's been the keynote speaker, one of the presenters as well. And he has a lot of resources and a lot of research and a lot of understanding and techniques that are related to pronunciation. And there's a lot of resources he shares that I want to share with you too. But I think one of the most important keys to pronunciation and teaching English language learners how to have better pronunciation is what Adrienne Underhill says when he states the necessary practice of new language is enriched by simply adding the dimension of noticing pronunciation. So Adrienne Underhill does not say that necessarily we should teach it separately, but what he advocates is when you are teaching your learners that you just let them notice their pronunciation. So when you're teaching grammar, when you're teaching new vocabulary, when you're teaching about past tense or whatever topic it is that you're teaching, you just make them pay attention to the way they pronounce words. So for example, if you're teaching about the past tense, then what will we make them notice? What kind of pronunciation are they going to have that they maybe want to pay attention to? And you might have already thought of the ED sound, the it at the end. So if you notice your students have an issue with that, and most students, most language learners do the past tense, the ED, then that's what you would make them. You would just point it out and then have them, practice a few times. But that doesn't take really, it doesn't mean stopping the class. It doesn't mean taking 10 minutes dedicating to the ED sounds. Although there are scholars who believe in that, there are scholars who have exercises for that. But Adrienne Underhill says, states, especially when teachers are very busy and they don't have enough time to add this to the curriculum, but they are dealing with language learners, it's important to just have them pay attention to the way they pronounce things. And one of the things that he does also think is great for that, and you'll see that in a lot of his work and videos as well, is that we have the ability with technology to have learners record themselves. So that's one way that they can notice their pronunciation. Just like I said in the past, when it comes to me, then it's really great for me. For me, I cannot tell that I am not pronouncing that my pronunciation is wrong. If I sound it out, I can practice sounding it out. And Peggy George asked a great question. She says, "Is modeling the appropriate language being used correctly the best, rather than stopping them and correcting them?" I think that modeling is important, but I think what's really good is just having the whole class pay attention. You can try to correct them, but I think that's not as effective as if you do notice that some of your learners aren't that great with pronunciation. They have heavy accents. Then my recommendation would be for you to get them to do exercises where they record themselves. That way they can listen to how they are not correctly doing this. And video is even better if they can see their mouth movements, because and that's what should be modeled when you're talking about being modeling the way a word should be pronounced. It's modeling the mouth movements, the nasal, the lip, the tongue, and all of that is important to pronunciation. So these are some other great tips that Adrienne Underhill gives. In this particular article, when he talks about it, he talks about business English, but I think this applies to all kinds of pronunciation enhancement. Now, he says this is how to develop attention to it, not enhance, but what he alludes to as developing attention to pronunciation. So, enjoying it, which means when you do stop someone and correct them constantly, that really doesn't help them enjoy it. Not that that's bad, but if they have a recording or they can pay attention and correct themselves that way, then that's even more effective than stopping the whole class or pointing it out in front of the whole class. It's better to be able for them to be able to see what they're doing wrong, hear what they're doing wrong. So I think recording is much more effective. To vary it, in other words, have different ways that you're learning pronunciation. Last week we talked about rhymes, we talked about tongue twisters, we talked about games that you use with the mouth and tongue. So vary the practice of it, and it's going to be more enjoyable. You're going to remember things better. Compare the old way with the new way, which is such an important point. If you can have your students look at the way they pronounce the word, and they're able to see, especially in a video, it's almost like if you watch a game. If you watch, for example, a football game or a soccer game, and you see the players, and then you do the rewind, then you can see how the goal was made or what the play was. And it's sort of the same way with pronunciation. If they can see how they pronounced the word before and it was incorrect, and then they learn how to pronounce it the new way and see how different the mouth movements or what they did wrong, then they may be able to do that better. And that's a really good question, Beata. Who asked, what if they tell you they don't feel comfortable recording? Let them know the recording is just for them, and they can, if adults and teens have their mobile device, if they can record, that's a very good question, by the way. If they can just record their mouth moving where it doesn't show their whole face, if they're uncomfortable showing their face, record it one way, and then when you teach them how to pronounce it correctly, then have them pronounce it again correctly the way you correct it, and the mouth movements, pay attention, and have them compare those recordings. Now, if somebody doesn't like their voice, that's a good point too. So Beata raises a point. If one student doesn't like how he sounds, ask him to do it at home first and see if he'll do it at home to keep practicing, because usually what happens is that they feel not confident enough in their pronunciation, that they don't want to do it in front of the class. So if they'll do it by themselves, self practice a lot, and they'll just look at their mouth movements, or even what another solution can be, that they record it with no sound, because if it's just the sounding of the voice and they see the mouth movement and then compare how they did the mouth movement when you modeled it and it was corrected, then that way they know that they're at least making improvements on the mouth movement. So that might be another way to get them to start practicing, because the mouth movement, the back of the throat, and that's if you do have students who struggle a lot with pronunciation, when they are practicing pronunciation, have them look at, for example, to feel the way they do it. So I'm going to try video really quick for just a second. Hopefully it doesn't disrupt the recording, or I mean, yeah, hopefully it doesn't. You never know, because things here. Um, so sorry if this is a little bandwidth, but we'll try it real quick. So when we are pronouncing a word, like let's say taste and tasted. So if they can look at your mouth, if they can feel, have them pronounce something they all struggle with. If you know your students are going to struggle with ED, then have them, feel their throat, tasted. Have them do it again, where they feel their mouth, tasted. If they can feel on their hands the different ways that they do the mouth movements, if they can record it with a device, like if they get their device and just do the recording of their mouth, then that could help them a lot as well. But get them to look at your mouth movements to model it, but then to also feel those mouth movements. See how their lips, if their lips go thin, if they're pronouncing at the back of their throat, they can get a hand mirror, and that's one of the suggestions that goes later. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off because it takes a lot of bandwidth, these cameras. But when you can have them feel it and see it, then that helps them to remember where that pronunciation, how their mouth is moving. And a lot of sites will show you how to do that. Show them the pronunciation chart. That usually gets them to pay attention to word stress, unstress. And then for them, a lot of students get really stressed out with pronunciation. They don't like you to point it out. And so if they relax, if they calm down and speak slower, that really helps them a lot. You want to learn a lot more and different techniques, then I recommend this series. It came out from Macmillan, but it's a 40 YouTube videos of pronunciation skills with Adrienne Underhill, and he walks you through the different practices and shows you different types of techniques. It's actually 39 videos with an introduction video. So that's what I would recommend. It's a free resource by Macmillan. So let's look at phonetic charts and also media. So I'll show you first the one Adrienne Underhill came up with. It is the Sounds Pronunciation iOS and Android app, which is free. There are parts that are free, and then they have some things that students can. This is for self-practice, but you can also pass this around and have students look at the chart. So it does have phonetic spelling, and there's an argument whether students really need to learn this or not. And the reason why there's arguments about that, because Native American students do not, I mean, Native speakers of English that are American students do not learn this. They actually don't really learn about phonetic charts, and that's not how they learn how to pronounce English, and usually there's a lot of dialects in America. So this usually isn't taught. but in other situations, in other cases, it is taught. So this might be helpful for your students. You can show them the phonetic spelling. I'm not, so you may be, it depends on you, but some teachers find it very effective to teach the phonetic spellings, and also also to have this quizzed and drilled. And other teachers, such as and I'm one of these teachers, um, don't feel like it's that something that I should stress. I should take a lesson plan on. I do, however, think that mouth movements does help a lot. And there's a lot of really great sites that will show the mouth movements. So this is something they can self-study and practice, or that you can show. So let's say that you are not a native English speaking teacher. And as I said in the last webinar, I have met tons. I've been to over 26 countries. I've met teachers. I've gone into their classroom. I've worked with their students from the ages of 2 to adults. And it doesn't matter if they have a heavy accent and if English isn't their first language. I still see that a lot of their students will have great pronunciation. Some of their students will have almost native speaking like pronunciation. And it didn't have any bearing on whether their teacher had a heavy accent or not. So in my personal belief, it's not that indicates pronunciation. What helps with pronunciation is their own learning, whether they're able to notice the mouth movements, and the sounds of speech is really good with that. The really great thing about sounds of speech is it also has for French as well, and it has other languages. So if you're trying to learn other languages, then you may want to check, because there it shows you how to make the mouth movements, but it also and it does differ. It breaks up the sounds of English, which is phonetics, those building blocks. It tells you, it makes you see the difference of how you pronounce consonants versus vowels. And not only does it have American English, it has British English too. So if whether you're teaching British English or American English, the Sounds of Speech is a really great website to really teach you. It has the animations with sounds, step-by-step description for your students. It also has a video of the mouth. It also has the sounds. So it has it all. It's a great site. I recommend it. Pronunciation Power is a great mobile device for iOS and Android. Now, it's great to have these apps when your student for your students, especially if they struggle, especially if you have those students that are embarrassed about hearing themselves because they feel like um, let's say that they feel like their accent is so strong. So a lot of them, you want to encourage them to do self-study. And for adults, one of the best ways to do self-study is if you have a free app that really gets you to practice. That way they can practice at home, they can practice while waiting for the bus, they can practice while waiting for your class, they can practice while in the bathroom. I mean, there's a lot of different ways they can practice. And the Pronunciation Power app is a free app for iOS and Android. And your students get to see, once again, the mouth movements of video, and they get to hear what is pronounced, and they get to learn the phonetics. It's broken down. It's broken down into sample words, comparative words that they can use, and that can really help them focus. eLang is another place that has where you can see, for example, the phonetic chart and script. So if your students do want to pay attention, if they are very good with knowing the phonetic scripts, then they can use a chart like this, and this can help them. If they run into a word, let's say that they're reading a book and they're not very sure how a particular word is going to be pronounced, but they read it. And that does happen. Many of our readers, and actually, when I was growing up in Texas, Spanish and English were both my first languages. I learned them at the same time. But when I learned Spanish, when I was learning English, I already had a dialect, and I already had pronunciation for my particular type of where I was learning Spanish and English. And so I was reading at an 8th grade level when I was in 2nd grade. And so many of the words that I learned, I did not know how to pronounce. Now, if I would have checked the phonetics of it, if I would have had a site like this and I would have learned phonetics about the phonetic chart and also the phonetic symbols, then I could have put that word into, I mean, back then we didn't have, this was before the internet and computers. So if I would have put it in, I would have known how to pronounce that word. And so for many of your students, they may know big words, they may know how to read and and be very advanced in English, but they may not know how to pronounce that word. And so the phonetic chart could be knowing the phonetic spelling could be very good for them, so they know how to sound it out. I'm going to show you another resource towards the end, 2 of them that are sound dictionaries. They're pronunciation dictionaries, and that will also help with that. So if you're not a teacher who teaches the phonetic symbols, your students will still have the benefit if they run into a word in a novel, a book, an article, and they say, wow. For example, last week we talked about onomatopoeia, and Christina, who isn't here right now, but she was saying how onomatopoeia is a very complicated and difficult looking word to sound. And if you wanted to see what onomatopoeia did sound like, you would be able to put in one of these dictionaries and learn the pronunciation. So I will show you some good resources for that. So how do we get our students to practice? Well, there are some fun ways. Remember, Adrienne Underhill says, practice, you have to vary it, and you have to make it fun. Well, how do you make it fun for adults and teens? EnglishCentral.com, one of the most amazing sites. It's been around forever and it gets better and better, and I love it. So EnglishCentral.com, you just click on a video. You can even do this without registering. If you register, it actually documents your progress. You decide what level you are. Are you intermediate? Are you a beginner? How are you? And then you watch a YouTube video of your choice. Back here, they have plenty of YouTube videos. You see here, there's tons. You can, the topics are business. So if you're a business English teacher, media, social, travel English, academic, if you teach English as for academic purposes, if you teach young learners, grammar, pronunciation, useful expressions. So when you choose your video, it has the words from the YouTube video. So you can watch the video, learn the words, speak the lines, go live. The second part is you allow your microphone on your computer. You click here, speak the line. And when you speak, you just basically repeat the line. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Excuse me, but what are you doing?" So you hear it first as it is in the video, and then you speak it. And when you speak the lines, it's going to rate them for you. It's going to tell you, you did this correctly, you need to do it again, or you didn't score so high. It actually is, the computer is so smart. Their system is so smart that for free, it'll listen to you. Their computer system will listen to you and let you know whether you have appropriate pronunciation. So that is a very awesome, wonderful. They can look at Katy Perry videos if they want, if that's their thing. If they want to look at John Wayne ones and have a cowboy accent, they can look whatever kind of YouTube video that is of their particular interest, and they can do the self-study. And if they register for free, they can compete against others, or they can see what they've learned. They can keep track of their progress. They also have pronunciation videos that will specifically show you how to pronounce consonants, the P sound, p, p, or the T sound, which is often difficult. The D and the T are sometimes difficult. They have verses here, so that's They have a lot of pronunciation videos as well. You can have your students practice in the mirror. They have a little hand mirror, especially good for um, your students. Your female students will often have a hand mirror that they carry around. Encourage them when they're out in the subway to practice the mouth movements. Even if they don't want to practice the pronunciation, let's say they're a little embarrassed to say words in English in public, they can always practice what their mouth should look like. Um, Look at their mouth and try, making sure that they do pronounce it correctly or make the mouth movements. And they can even compare. They can look at their mobile device and see. They can look at the video with earphones. They can look at one of those videos that shows the mouth movement, and then they can practice the mouth movement. Make it fun by learning through songs. There's a lot of karaoke English sites out there. There's a lot of rap music. So this is, if you make it fun for students, young learners, there's tons of songs. Well, the equivalent for a fun song is for adults is fluencymc.com. So fluencymc.com, Jason Levine, a very good friend of mine, he's located in Paris, and he has songs for adults that adults enjoy learning English with. And he helps you with rhyming, which is really good for pronunciation. So you can look at Jason Levine's at FluencyMC, fluencymc.com. He has a lot of videos. He has a book with the song lyrics. I mean, his are, and singing is a great way to practice pronunciation. And here you can go to fluencymc.com/free songbook. He also has a lot of MOOCs and all kinds of things. He travels around the world. He's really great. You want to show them authentic examples of different people pronouncing the word, or you want them to be able to distinguish different accents. So a lot of times if there's a robot voice, that's not as good as if they hear someone natural pronounce it. So one site I learned about is called youglish.com. It's a really great site. It takes authentic examples from YouTube. You can embed this in a blog. So if you have your own website, if you have your own blog, your own wiki, you can actually you can embed this whole entire thing just like this, where your students can fast forward, they can rewind, and they can play, and they can listen to examples from YouTube. Oh, well, thank you, Beata. So she's saying, Beata says that Youglish is a really great site to use. So I learned about this from Nick Peachy. And Nick Peachy actually has some really great pronunciation. This is the way it looks, by the way, Youglish, when he embedded it in his website. Okay, so Nick Peachy has a lot of activities for English language learners. If you look at his blog, quickshout.blogspot.com, on how to do self-study and practice their pronunciation. So if you want to learn more, go to quickshout.blogspot.com. Go ahead and do a quick look for pronunciation. You're going to find a lot of great ways to use technology to help your learners with their pronunciation, even exercises. Forvo.com is one of the best pronunciation dictionaries out there, because not only it's not that easy to navigate. So I wanted to show you this particular screenshot, because with Forvo, you can look up any words. You don't have to register. But when you look up the word, let's say we looked at the word join, you're going to see how it's pronounced in English. It has 8 ones. And it has 8 different, it has different pronunciations. It has practice sentences and sayings. If you can't beat them, join them. And then it has authentic, like speaker in that language actually saying those phrases for you. So it has different types of idioms associated. Join up, join so you do learn collocations, join us. I mean, so that's really great. If you register, you can add words you want to learn to pronounce. You can vote on pronunciations. You keep track of any words that you add. You can even download MP3s of the pronunciation. So that's really fantastic because your learners who are trying to, um, it also helps them with listening as well. The BBC, if you're teaching British English, this site is no longer updated, but it has many different examples, exercises, readings, video recordings. You can even download it. In fact, it automatically, when you click on an example, it automatically downloads it for you. So you have that sound archive, and you can do a lot of exercises, even listening practice with this particular website. So if you teach British English, then this site, even though it's no longer updated, has tons and tons of examples of different types of accents and different types of pronunciation. PronounceNames.com. I mentioned this before. You can learn how to pronounce any name. You can even add your own name to this list. And some more resources before we wrap up. HowJusay.com. So what this does is, once again, we use the word join. It's a free online talking dictionary. You submit the word, and then it appears in pink. When it appears in pink, you just put your mouse over it, and then you'll hear it pronounced. So you have to actually put your mouse over it to hear it pronounced. Text to phonetics, another way to translate into phonetic spelling. If you are one of those teachers that does focus on the phonetic spelling, this is a way that you can get the phonetic spelling. UPODN.com, another way to do the phonetic spelling. And you have different ones. You have IPA, American Phonetic Alphabet, SAMPA. I mean, so it has, it also has where it'll show you the different stress. And then, so some of your students, when we do teach pronunciation in certain languages, and if you're a native speaker, then you're going to know this better than someone who is a non-native speaker of your particular language, not of English. I'm talking about your language. So if, for example, you teach French and you also are an English language teacher, then you're going to know better than me if I went and I taught in France, being a native speaker, and I taught French students. You're going to know better than me what kind of problems French students tend to have when they learn English, because you learned English, okay? So all of that, use that knowledge. Think about, in your language, what are the problem areas when it comes to pronunciation, and then help your students to solve those errors. There are a lot of different, look at games that, there's word games. Fluentu.com has a lot of ways that you can solve ESL student pronunciation problems. Now, some of us, and often, you don't have a room full of speakers from that area. So, for example, when I taught in Germany, not all my students were from Germany. Some were from Serbia. I had a lot from Serbia. I had a lot from different countries that were near there, Hungary and some other Turkish students as well, who lived in Germany and who were learning English, and also who some of them were learning German. So they had different problems. But if you can tell what is your students' pronunciation problems, and something that I did learn in my CELTA when I took that in Greece was a book by Michael English, and Michael Swan. And Michael Swan has a really great book. I think it was published in the 1980s or 70s. It's a yellow book, and it actually lets you know your pronunciation problems from any type of area. It'll tell you what are the typical problems. Once you know those, then you can have your students practice those games. Some are minimal pairs. And so this fluentu.com article has a lot of great techniques on how to assess and also solve particular pronunciation problems that are for your students, your group of students. And I think that's important too when working with adults and teens. A lot of pronunciation issues have to deal with what's difficult in their language. So, for example, the double L in Spanish, because I know Spanish, double L is not the same as it presents a problem for a lot of English language speakers or those learning English. And the reason why is because we pronounce it with like a Y, like a yeah, like so Shelly is actually very hard for a lot of speakers to pronounce. So I think it's when you know that, when you know like what will be the difficulties, then you can have your students practice, and then you can help them with those specific areas. And yes, like Peggy George mentioned, I often think, when I think of pronunciation, I think this is a great suggestion. Watch My Fair Lady, because this is a great movie that takes someone that is very poor, that learns a dialect just like I did, and teaches them how to be better at pronunciation so they speak proper English. And the techniques there also really help with pronunciation in the classroom. That could be a fun way to also model correct pronunciation from that movie. You can see some exercises. So thank you for the new resources that are out there as well. I see pronunciation pack series by the Hancock McDonald. So thank you, Beata, for sharing that. And if you have any other resources, feel free to share with them. Let us know if you're on Twitter, Facebook,